The wind is tearing at a lonely mountain inn, and Clara already knows what that usually means. No guests, no money, and another night, hearing the silence of disappointment. But then, through the whiteout, a figure stumbles toward the porch, half frozen, bleeding, and barely standing. They pull him inside, save his life. And Clara discovers something shocking. This tough, scarred mountain man can't read. Not a single word. He didn't find help because he followed a sign. He found it by luck. And with one honest request, "Will you teach me?" Clara's quiet, forgotten life begins to crack wide open. Because what starts as a simple reading lesson turns into a choice that could ruin her reputation. Or finally set her free. Lesson. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't surviving a storm, it's believing you deserve more and choosing it anyway. If you're ready for the story about dignity, love, and starting over when everyone's watching, hit like tell me in the comments what part hooked you most. Share this with someone who needs hope, and subscribe so you don't miss stories that stay with you. The wind was howling something fierce, rattling the old inn like it was trying to tear it right off the mountain. "That's the last of the good firewood," her daddy called out, with that worried tone he tried so hard to hide. If the storm didn't let up, they'd be breaking up chairs to stay warm. But Clara wasn't listening. She was staring out at the white blur of the road. No one was coming. That meant more empty rooms, more of her mother's disappointed silence, and more numbers that just didn't add up. Their inn was dying ever since a fancy new hotel opened down in Silver Creek, about 8 miles away. That place had real crystal glasses and a piano man. It was the kind of place her mother always wished they were, instead of this old log building that smelled like yesterday's coffee. Clara had spent all 26 years of her life in this place, being the innkeeper's useful, unseen daughter. She knew why. She saw it in her own reflection. A plain face, a sturdy body, and hair the color of muddy water. She learned a long time ago that the best thing she could be was quiet and helpful. A fella named David Mitchell made sure she learned that lesson good and hard. He courted her for about 3 months when she was 19, filling her head with all sorts of hopes. Then she heard him laughing with his buddies. "Clara?" he'd snickered. "Heavens no, I was just being polite." The rest of it was lost in their hollering, but she had heard plenty. She walked home all by herself that night, went up to her little room, and built a wall around her heart so thick and so high that nobody was ever getting close enough to hurt her like that again. That was 7 years ago. David married a little blonde thing 2 years later. And Clara, well, she served them their wedding night dinner with a polite smile, while something deep inside her just turned to ice. Just then a shape moved through the swirling snow on the road. At first she thought it was a bear, the way it was stumbling and lurching. Then she saw it was a man hunched over and struggling toward their inn. He was hurt bad. Without a second thought, Clara grabbed her shawl and threw the door open. The cold nearly knocked the wind out of her. "Daddy!" she yelled. "We've got someone coming!" She met the stranger on the porch steps. His face was a mess of scars, his beard was frozen solid, and a dark stain of blood was spreading across his coat. "Help," he whispered, the sound almost stolen by the wind. She grabbed his arm to steady him. He was a big man, built solid like the mountains he came from. He stumbled on that last broken step, the one she'd been meaning to fix. He pitched forward, and she used all her weight to catch him as they both tumbled inside into the warmth of the inn. Her father came running, took one look, and let out a soft curse. "Clara, get some blankets. I'll get my medical bag." They settled the man in a chair near the fire. He looked even worse up close, but his eyes were sharp, watching everything they did. As Clara helped him with his coat, he rasped, "Be careful. Rifle went off. I think the bullet's still in there." Her father, who'd been a surgeon in the army, got to work. "We need this coat off. Clara, I need hot water, and plenty of it." They gently peeled off the soaked layers. The bullet had gone in high on his left side. It was bleeding steady, but not pumping, which was a good sign. "What's your name, son?" her father asked as he prepared a needle. "Jonah Reed," the man said, his voice gravelly. "Got a cabin about 12 miles north of here. Was checking my traps when this blizzard hit." Her father just shook his head. "You're lucky to be alive. How'd you find us?" "Saw the sign," Jonah said. "The one for the inn." Clara stopped dead in her tracks, the pot of hot water feeling heavy in her hands. She had painted that sign herself. "You could read it? In a storm like this?" she asked. Jonah's gray eyes, the color of the storm itself, met hers. "Saw the arrow," he said softly. "Figured it pointed toward shelter." He couldn't read. Her father was already digging for the bullet. Jonah gripped the arms of the chair, his whole body tense, but he never made a sound. Without even thinking, Clara set the water down, went to his side, and took his free hand. "Squeeze," she told him. "It'll help." He looked at her, confused for a second. Then his rough, calloused fingers wrapped around hers. His whole hand was shaking. "Got it," her father grunted, dropping a piece of lead into a bowl. For the next 20 minutes, Clara held Jonah's hand and spoke to him in a low, calm voice. She talked about the fire and the wind, anything to distract him. "You're doing real good," she murmured. "He's almost done." When it was over, Jonah slumped in the chair, exhausted. Her father told him, "You'll have to stay here a few days. That wound needs to heal." "I can't pay you much," Jonah said, his voice low. "We'll figure something out," her daddy replied. Getting Jonah up the stairs was slow going. He leaned on Clara, his arm heavy on her shoulders. He smelled like pine trees and snow and wood smoke. The room was simple, with a bed and a washstand. Clara helped him onto the bed and lit the oil lamp. "I'll bring you up some stew," she said. "Anything else you need?" Jonah just looked around the small, clean room like he'd never seen such a fine place. "This is good," he said. "More than good." Clara paused at the door. "That sign on the road," she said. "You really couldn't read the words." His jaw set firm. "Never learned how?" The question just popped out of her mouth. "Why not?" He looked at her with those honest, tired eyes. "Never had no one to teach me." Imagine being a strong, capable man, but a simple piece of paper with letters on it could nearly end your life. That was Jonah's story. He stumbled into our inn half frozen, not because he was lost, but because he could not read the sign that said we were just around the bend. He ate the venison stew I brought him with a quiet focus that spoke of real hunger. When he finished, he thanked me, his voice rough. He admitted he lived a simple life up in his mountain cabin, all alone. That word alone hung in the air because I knew exactly how that felt. Just as I was about to leave him to rest, he stopped me. He said he saw the thought in my eyes when he confessed he was illiterate. He asked me straight out if I would teach him to read. His request was so honest it nearly took my breath away. He was tired of not knowing, tired of being the man who could not understand a sign pointing the way to safety. "I'm not a teacher," I told him. But he just looked at me and said, "You can read so you can teach." "I will work to pay you back," he promised. And for the first time I saw a crack in his tough exterior, a deep uncertainty. In that moment, something shifted in our quiet inn. This wounded stranger was asking for the one thing nobody ever asked of me, my knowledge. I heard myself agreeing to help, telling him about the old school books I still had. A look of pure relief washed over his face, a sight more welcome than a real smile. My mother, however, was not pleased. She found me in the kitchen and called him a charity case, a wild thing I was trying to fix. She reminded me of a bird with a broken wing I had nursed as a child. The day it could fly, it left without a single look back. She warned me that Jonah was a hard man, made that way by the mountains, and he would do the same. She said he was dangerous and that I could not change him. I looked my mother in the eye and told her I was not trying to change him. I was just teaching him how to read a book. But her words followed me to my room that night, leaving a sting of doubt. A few days later, I took his breakfast tray upstairs. He was sitting on the bed with his shirt off. My face grew hot, but I could not look away from the map of scars across his back. They told a story of a hard and painful life. When I finally found my voice, I told him I had meant my offer. We could start the lessons as soon as he felt strong enough to sit at a table. He looked out at the snow-covered world and said he wanted to start right away. I asked him why now, after all these years. Why did reading suddenly matter so much? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said he was tired of being ignorant, tired of feeling like half a man because he could not do something a small child could. That deep, weary honesty resonated with me. I understood feeling less than what you were meant to be. So we started. I opened the first primer, and we began with the letter A. He stared at it like it was a puzzle he was determined to solve. He repeated the sounds, his voice thick with effort but unwavering. When he got one right, a real, unguarded look of pride lit up his face, and a warmth bloomed in my own chest. Weeks turned into a month. Jonah was a fast learner, and his hands were just as clever. He fixed the porch steps, repaired the stable door, and his quiet presence became a comfort. My mother watched him, her disapproval slowly fading. One afternoon, a slick salesman came through trying to get my father to sign a delivery contract. My father's eyesight was failing, and he trusted the man's words. But Jonah, who was stacking firewood nearby, stepped forward. He calmly took the papers and, in a clear voice, read the fine print aloud. The salesman was trying to lock us into a terrible deal. Jonah's reading saved our family a small fortune and possibly the inn itself. The salesman left in a hurry. My mother just stood there, staring at Jonah with a new kind of respect. She finally saw the man, not the drifter. That spring, the snow melted, but Jonah did not leave. He told me he had spent his whole life wandering, but our little inn was the first place that ever felt like home. And I realized I was home, too. It turns out that sometimes, by helping a lost soul find their way, you end up finding your own. And that is a lesson you cannot learn from any book. The lessons went on. Each morning, Jonah and Clara would sit in the front room while the inn slowly came to life around them. Letters started making sounds, and those sounds started making words. Lord knows Jonah had a hard time with it. His rough hands weren't made for holding a pen, and his mind wasn't used to this kind of quiet work. But he never once thought about quitting. Cat, Clara said, pointing at the page. Sound it out. Jonah squinted. K. Ah. T. Cat. A smile broke across Clara's face. That's it. That's your first word. Jonah stared at the book like it was pure magic. I read that, he whispered. One day he looked up from his book and asked her plain, Why are you doing this for me? You don't know me from Adam. I can't pay you, and your own mama looks at me like I'm trouble. Clara took a breath. Because nobody ought to live their life unable to read, she said. It's like being locked outside of a house everyone else gets to live in. She paused, surprised by her own next words. And because you asked, you wanted to learn, and that matters a whole lot. To her, wanting to learn meant you hadn't given up on yourself yet. She looked him square in the eye. Most folks give up. Jonah was quiet for a spell. Did you? He asked softly. Give up? The question found a tender spot. Yes, she admitted, looking down at her ink-stained fingers. For a long time I did. What changed? Nothing. And everything, she said with a sad little laugh. Truth is, I'm 26, still living here, changing sheets and serving meals. It's a useful life, but it ain't a full one. It's just getting by. Jonah nodded. I know that feeling. I get by up on my mountain. Hunt, trap, sleep, repeat. Never thought about more till now. What changed for you, Jonah? I nearly died. That bullet. If I hadn't stumbled onto your place, I'd have been gone. And lying there with your daddy digging lead out of me, I just thought, is this all I am? A man who dies alone on a mountain and no one even knows his name? Clara's heart ached for him. "I don't want that anymore," he said, his voice thick. "I want to be more than what I've been." The room felt small all of a sudden. When Clara stood up for some air, Jonah stood too. They were close, just like that first night. "You're already more," she said quietly. "You just couldn't see it." His calloused hand gently brushed her cheek, a touch as light as a whisper. "Neither could you," he said. He stepped back. "Should we get back to it?" She nodded, and they sat down with the book. But things were different now. A wall between them had cracked, and for the first time, they both saw the same hunger in each other's eyes. A couple of weeks went by, and Jonah could read simple sentences, his voice slow but proud. He spent his days fixing things around the inn, mending fences, fixing the porch step. Clara's mother, however, watched them with a worried eye. She finally pulled Clara aside one morning. "This has to stop," she said flatly. "What has to stop?" "You know what. These lessons, the time you spend with him. Folks are starting to talk." "What folks?" "Mrs. Patterson came by yesterday, saw you two with your heads together over those books. She asked me if something was going on." Clara's face burned with shame. "I'm just teaching him to read." "It looks like a whole lot more. People are going to gossip about the innkeeper's plain daughter and that scarred mountain man, about how desperate it makes you look." The words plain and desperate hit Clara like a slap. "Get out," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Clara, get out." Her mother left, leaving Clara trembling in the kitchen. She heard a footstep and turned. Jonah was standing in the doorway. She knew right away he'd heard every word. "I'm sorry," she said. "Don't be. You shouldn't have heard that." "But I did," he said, stepping inside. "And I'm glad. Because now I understand." "Understand what?" "Why you get it," he said, moving closer. "When I said I was tired of being half a man, you knew exactly what I meant. 'Cause they've made you feel that way, too." She couldn't meet his eyes. "They've told you you're less than you are, haven't they?" he asked gently. "That wanting more for yourself is a foolish dream." "Yes," she choked out. "Then it's the same for us both," he said. Clara finally looked up at him. "So what do we do?" "We keep going," Jonah said simply. "We don't stop. Unless you want to. I'd understand." "No," she said, and the word was full of fire. "No, I don't want to stop." A new light came into Jonah's eyes. "Good," he said. "Neither do I." That afternoon, Clara found Jonah in the barn, fixing a crooked stall door. He worked with that same quiet focus he gave his reading lessons. "My mother was wrong," Clara announced from the doorway. Jonah looked up, hammer in hand. "About us," she said, stepping into the smell of hay and old leather. "I don't care if people talk." "You have to live here, Clara. I don't," he said, putting the hammer down. "That's exactly why I need to stop caring," she said, moving closer. "I have spent 7 years living my life based on what other people might think. Being quiet, being useful, just so they'd put up with me. And for what?" He just looked at her. "What changed?" "You did," she admitted. "You showed up wanting to do something impossible and you just did it anyway. You're learning to read, Jonah. You don't quit and you don't complain, you just keep going. I have a good teacher." "You have grit," she corrected him. "And you reminded me I used to have it too. Before David Mitchell. Before I decided that wanting anything for myself was just too dangerous." Jonah's jaw went tight. "Who's David Mitchell?" So she told him everything, the hopes, the courting, and the terrible shame of it all, the laughter at the harvest dance, the journal she filled with tears and locked away. When she finished, Jonah's voice was hard as iron. "He was a fool. He was just being honest." "No," Jonah said, his voice sharp. "He was being cruel. There's a big difference between truth and meanness." What he did wasn't about you. It was about him being too much of a coward to be a man. And in his anger, Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest she hadn't felt in a long, long time. He looked her square in the eye. You don't deserve what they made you believe. You shouldn't have to live small just because some other man was a fool. Then what do I deserve? The question hung heavy in the air. Jonah set down a log, his voice rough as bark. More than this. And sure as hell more than me. Don't! Clara stepped right up to him. Don't you decide what's best for me. Everybody else in my life has tried that. That's not what I am doing. It is. She was near enough to see the deep gray of his eyes. You are trying to push me away, telling yourself you're not good enough. Well, I do not need protecting, Jonah. I need someone who actually sees me and is not afraid to look. He just stared, his throat working. Then, slow and sure, he reached out and took her hand. His palm was calloused and warm. I see you, he said quietly. I have sensed that first night. You were not afraid of me. You were just kind. The real kind that does not expect anything in return. Clara's breath caught in her chest. I see you too, she whispered. They stood together in the quiet of the barn, sunlight slicing through the wooden planks. Outside, her father's axe fell in a steady rhythm. Reckon we should get back to it, Jonah finally said, but his hand stayed firm in hers. I reckon we should, she agreed, not moving an inch. A small, real smile touched his face. Another lesson, then? Yes, but first let me see your homework. He carefully unfolded a paper from his pocket. In a rough but readable script, he had written the words: cat, dog, sun, moon, home. Home, Clara said softly, her finger tracing the word. Seemed like a good one to learn, Jonah said. Never had much use for it. He looked at her, and for a second she saw a mix of hope and fear in his eyes. Now, I am starting to understand what it means. The barn door swung open. Her father stood in the doorway. He did not seem to notice them holding hands. Storm's rolling in, he announced. Jonah, I could use a hand with the shutters. Of course. Jonah squeezed Clara's hand once, then let go. Clara stood alone in the barn, her palm still warm. She saw dark clouds gathering over the mountains. They would be trapped for days, and part of her was glad. The snow started after supper, and by nightfall the world was a wall of white. Inside, her father smoked by the fire while her mother worked on her sewing, the silence between them heavy. Jonah sat near the window practicing his letters by lamplight. Clara brought him coffee. Would you read to us? She asked softly. His eyes widened. What? The story from your book, the one you have been practicing. Read it out loud. Panic crossed his face. Clara, I can't. You can, she insisted, taking a seat across from him. You know all the words, please. She opened the primer to the page. I would like to hear you read it. Jonah glanced nervously at her parents. Her father lowered his pipe, watching. Her mother's face was a blank slate. Jonah swallowed hard and pulled the book closer. The dog ran home, he began, his voice halting. His tail wagged. It took him 10 minutes to read 6 short sentences. His face was red when he finished, but he looked at Clara with a glimmer of pride. That was wonderful, she told him. It was rough as a cob. It was brave. She covered his hand with hers. You did something that scared you, and you saw it through. Her father cleared his throat. Had a sergeant in the army who could not read. Fine man. Took him 2 years to learn, but he did it. You have got that same kind of grit, son. He pointed at Jonah with his pipe. You keep at it. Thank you, sir. Her mother said nothing, but Clara caught a look on her face that was not judgment. It was the start of understanding. As the storm raged that night, Clara lay in bed, thinking about his hand holding hers. She thought about the way he looked at her in the barn, and about the word he had practiced, home. She fell asleep, and for the first time in years, she did not dream of being small. Morning brought 3 feet of new snow, burying them completely. Her father spent an hour digging a tunnel just to open the front door. "Could be a week before the road is clear," he said. A week. Trapped inside with Jonah, with their lessons, and with whatever this thing between them was. "I will earn my keep," Jonah insisted. And he was true to his word. He split enough wood to last a month, fixed every squeaky hinge in the inn, and even managed to get the smoky old oven working properly. Clara marveled at how capable he was. Every morning they had their lessons. Jonah struggled with all the peculiar rules of spelling, but he never once complained. When he got frustrated, he would just take a breath and start over. "Why is, though, spelled like that?" he asked, glaring at the word. "The GH is silent." "English is a borrowed language," Clara said. The spelling stuck around. "That is just foolish." "I agree." He rubbed his eyes. "How do kids learn this?" "Slowly. Just like you." She pointed to the next sentence. "Try this. I walked through the snow." He looked up, a small victory in his eyes. "Through, with the silent letters." "You remembered." The pride on his face was her reward. She collected these moments, the light in his eyes, the confidence in his voice, his easy smiles. On the 3rd day, her mother cornered her in the kitchen. "You are falling in love with him." Clara's hands froze in her bread dough. "Mother, don't. I see how you look at him, like he hung the moon. I am worried, Clara." "I know." "Do you?" Her mother sounded so tired. "Do you know what this will lead to? He is a mountain man with no education and no prospects. Think of what people will say." Clara turned to her mother. "They will say I was desperate, that I settled for whatever I could get." She brushed flour from her hands. "I know exactly what they will say. I have been hearing those voices in my own head for 7 years." "Then why, Clara?" "Because he sees me," she said simply. "Not the innkeeper's daughter, or the girl who was shamed at the dance. He just sees Clara. And for some reason, that is enough for him." Tears filled her mother's eyes. "Oh, honey." "I do not need your permission," Clara continued, her voice gentle but firm. "I am 26 years old, and I am finished with living a small life. If he leaves and breaks my heart, at least I will have felt something. At least I tried." She looked out the window at Jonah working in the cold. "And if he stays," she whispered, "then maybe I get to be happy. Maybe we both do." Her mother was silent for a long moment. "He is not the man I would have chosen for you. I know. But he is good to you, I see that." "Mama, I still think this is a mistake," her mother said with a sigh. "But I reckon it is your mistake to make. You just be careful, Clara." That evening, Jonah asked her to take a walk. They bundled up and stepped out into the biting cold under a clear, star-filled sky. They went to the barn, and by the warm glow of a lantern, he pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "I wrote this," he said. "It took me 3 whole days." Clara unfolded the paper. The handwriting was rough, but she could make out the words. He wrote that she had taught him he could be more than what he had been. She read it twice, her eyes stinging. "Jonah, this is full of mistakes," she whispered. "Teached is not a real word." "I know." "This is the most beautiful thing," she said, looking right at him. "You wrote me a letter." "My first one," he admitted. "I hope you write me 100 more," she said, holding the letter to her chest. Jonah stepped a little closer. "Clara, I need to tell you something." Her heart started pounding in her chest. "What is it?" "I'm not good with words or feelings. I have been on my own for so long, I do not know how." He stopped, looking frustrated. "What I am trying to say is that being here with you, it has changed something inside me. It has made me want things I never allowed myself to want." He reached out and gently touched her face. It made me think that maybe I could have a real life. Clara leaned into his touch. With me? If you would have me, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I know I am not much. I have no schooling, no money, nothing but a cabin on a mountain. But I work hard. He swallowed hard. I see you, Clara. All of you. And what I see is so good. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I see you too, Jonah. I see a man who is brave and kind and honest. That is not nothing. That is everything. He kissed her then, so gently, like he was afraid she might vanish. When he finally pulled away, Jonah was smiling. I should probably ask your father for his permission to court you properly. You probably should, Clara laughed, the sound light and free. Though I think he already has a good idea. Does he approve? He is waiting to see if you are serious. Jonah's face turned solemn. I am as serious as a heart attack. Then you tell him that, she said, standing on her toes to kiss him again. Tell him you want to build a life. With his daughter, Jonah finished for her. Her breath caught in her throat. Is that what you want? It is all I want, Jonah said, brushing her cheek with his thumb. If you will wait for me, while I learn to be the man you deserve. You already are that man. Not yet, he said, kissing her forehead. But I will be. I give you my word. They walked back to the inn, holding hands. That night, Clara pretended not to listen from the kitchen, as Jonah spoke with her father in the parlor. She heard the low rumble of their voices, and her father's sharp questions. Then, finally, she heard her father's gruff approval. You treat her right, son, or you will answer to me. Understood, sir. When Jonah came out, his face was flushed but victorious. He said yes. Clara threw her arms around his neck, not caring that her mother was watching. The storm broke a few days later, and the sun came out bright on the snow. Jonah stayed on at the inn, working for his keep. Every morning he and Clara had their reading lessons. Her father seemed pleased with the extra set of hands, and her mother watched them with cautious acceptance. Every evening, he read to her, his voice slow but getting stronger each time. The man walked through the forest, Jonah read one night, his finger tracing the words. He was searching for something he had lost long ago. What was he searching for? Clara asked softly. Jonah looked up from the page, his gray eyes meeting hers across the lamplight. Home, he said. He was searching for home. And Clara understood then what he had been trying to say all along. Home was not a place. It was a person. It was the feeling you got when someone saw everything you were and chose to stay. Did he find it? She asked. Jonah reached for her hand across the table. I think he did. Outside, winter still held the mountains tight. But inside the inn, something warm and new was growing. For the first time, Clara was not afraid of wanting something so badly. That fear came back, though, when Mrs. Patterson arrived 3 days after the storm cleared. She carried a basket of preserves and a smile that was all wrong. I heard you had a guest through the storm, she said, her eyes finding Jonah by the window. A mountain man, was it not? Mr. Reed has been helping with repairs in exchange for room and board, Clara's mother said stiffly. How dedicated of Clara to be giving him reading lessons, Mrs. Patterson continued, her tone full of insinuation. Mr. Reed is a quick learner, Clara said, keeping her voice steady as a rock. Mrs. Patterson leaned closer, her voice dropping to a loud whisper. Honey, I feel I should warn you. People are talking about all the time you two spend alone. And what exactly does it look like, Mrs. Patterson? Clara's direct question seemed to startle the older woman. Well, I'm sure nothing improper is happening, but you must understand. A young, unmarried woman, alone with a man like that. A stranger with no family, no standing. He is a man who needed help, Clara said quietly, and I was able to provide it. But think of your reputation, the woman insisted. There is no scandal, Clara's mother's voice cut through the room like a blade. My daughter is teaching a man to read. If people choose to see something ugly in an act of kindness, that says more about them than it does about my daughter. Clara, you ought to be more careful for your own good. After Mrs. Patterson left, Jonah stood by the window right next to her, his voice low. She is right, you know, about all the talk. I do not care what folks are saying. Well, you should. In the reflection, Jonah's face was a mess of worry. You have to live in this town, Clara, after I'm gone. Gone? Clara spun around to face him. You are not leaving. I have to eventually. Spring is coming. The pass will open up. I need to check my cabin and my trap lines. He just would not meet her eyes. This was always just for a little while. A cold feeling settled deep in Clara's chest. You asked my father for permission to court me. I know. You said you wanted to build a life here with me. I do. Jonah finally looked at her, and the hurt in his eyes nearly broke her heart. But maybe she is right. Maybe I am just being selfish. You could have a better man, someone who would not make people whisper behind your back. Do not. Clara's voice shook. Clara's voice. Do not do what David Mitchell did. Do not you dare decide for me what I want or what I can handle. I am not a little girl, Jonah. I am a woman, and I am making my own choice, a choice that could ruin you or save me. She grabbed his hand and held on tight. These past few weeks I have felt more alive than I have in 7 long years. Teaching you, talking with you, just being seen by you. That is not ruining me. That is the exact opposite. Jonah's jaw was set hard. But what if it is not enough? What if you wake up one morning and see you have tied yourself to a man who can hardly read, a man with nothing to offer but a shack on a mountain and hands that are better at skinning a deer than holding a woman? Then I will teach you that too. Clara pulled his hand against her chest, right over her heart. Feel that? That is my heart beating again. You gave that back to me. The chance to want something, to hope. You think I'm going to throw that away because of what Mrs. Patterson thinks? From across the room, Clara's father cleared his throat. The boy is scared, Clara. You cannot blame him for that. They both turned. Her father was standing in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed. How long he had been there, she had no idea. Being scared is fine, her father went on, but being a coward is not. Jonah, do you want my daughter? Do you want this life with her? More than anything, Jonah said, his voice thick with emotion. Then stop trying to protect her from choices she is big enough to make on her own. Stop deciding what is best for her. You ask her what she wants, and then you respect her answer. Her father's eyes were like steel. That is what love is, son. Not protection. It is respect. Jonah swallowed hard, then turned back to Clara. What do you want? You, Clara said, plain and simple. I want you. I want to keep teaching you. I want more evenings sitting by the fire. I want the life we have started right here. Even if it scares me, even if people talk, even if it is not what anybody planned for me. Especially because of that. Clara reached up and touched his scarred face. I do not want what is expected, Jonah. I do not want safe. I do not want to be some little doll that fits in this town's box. I want real. I want honest. I want you. Jonah caught her hand and pressed a kiss into her palm. Then you have me, he said, for as long as you will have me. But wanting something and keeping it turned out to be two very different things. The gossip Mrs. Patterson warned her about spread like a winter frost. When Clara went to the general store, folks would just stop talking. When she walked down the street, women turned their backs. And when she walked into church on Sunday, she could feel their judgment like a heavy blanket. The preacher's sermon was all about proper behavior and how a woman must guard her good name above all else. Clara sat in that pew, her back ramrod straight, while on the inside she was burning with shame and anger. After the service, people said hello to her parents but walked right past Clara like she was invisible. A few gave her these pitying looks that felt even worse than being ignored. Only Mary Chen, the doctor's wife, stopped to talk to her. "Pay them no mind," Mary said softly. "Small towns have small minds. They will find someone new to gossip about soon enough." "Will they?" Clara asked. Mary's smile was sad. "Eventually. But that does not make it hurt any less right now." Jonah had stayed home from church saying he had work to do, but Clara knew the real reason. He was hiding from the whispers in the stairs. When she got back, she found him in the barn, brushing down a horse with a fury. "You should not have stayed away," Clara said. "Seemed easier." "Easier for who?" Jonah did not have an answer. Clara walked over and took the brush from his hands. "Talk to me. What do you want me to say?" Jonah's voice was tight. "That I hate seeing what this is doing to you. That I lie awake at night knowing I am the reason people are treating you like dirt. That every time you come back from town looking like that, I want to—" He stopped, breathing hard. "You want to what?" "Leave. Just disappear back up my mountain where I cannot hurt you anymore." Clara set the brush down. "Is that what you think you are doing? Hurting me? Well, am I not? The people hurting me are the ones who think they have a right to judge my life. All for teaching a man to read. For spending time with someone who is kind to me. For choosing something for myself." Clara moved closer to him. "You are not hurting me, Jonah. You are the only thing holding me together." He pulled her against his chest, his arms wrapping tight around her. Clara could feel his heart pounding. "I do not know how to do this," he said into her hair. "I do not know how to be the man you need." "You already are," she said. "You just have to trust me to know my own heart." They just stood there in the barn, holding each other as the spring sunshine melted the last of the snow. The mountain pass would be clear soon. The road would be open. And what would happen then? Clara knew Jonah's cabin was 12 miles north, deep in the mountains. She knew his life was hard and lonely. Could she live like that? Could she leave her home, her parents, everything she had ever known? Did she even want to? The question followed her for days. Jonah kept up with his lessons, and he was getting better and better. He could read the newspaper now, slow but sure, and had started. Clara felt a knot of pride and dread tighten in her chest as she watched Jonah write. He gripped that pen so tight, like he was wringing out every last word he'd ever learned. She had taught him to read and write, but what would happen when the lessons ran out? Would he stay because he wanted to, or leave out of some misplaced sense of duty? The answer arrived with the mail, a letter from Montana. Jonah had worked a ranch there, before everything fell apart. "Bad news?" she asked, her heart sinking. He looked up, his face a mask of conflict. "It is a job offer," he said, his voice low. "The ranch is growing. They need men who know the work. It is good pay, a place to live, and steady." Montana might as well have been on the other side of the moon. A 4-day ride she could barely imagine. "Is that what you want?" she asked quietly. "To go back to that life?" Jonah put the letter down. "I spent so long by myself, I figured that was all I needed. I thought being around folks, having to answer to people, I thought it would choke the life right out of me." He paused, looking right at her. "But being here with you, it has not been like that at all. It has been good, real good. For the first time, I feel like I could have a life that is more than just getting by." Clara's throat felt tight. "But I cannot stay in this town," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "With everyone staring, just waiting for me to fail, for us to fail. And I will not ask you to leave all this. This is your home, Clara. Your family is here. What if I want to leave?" The words flew out of her mouth before she could stop them, surprising them both. But they felt true. She was not running away from her life. She was running toward a new one. "You do not mean that." Jonah said softly. I do, she insisted, reaching for his hand. I have been in this inn for 26 years, Jonah. I have been the good daughter, the one who stayed. I love my parents, but I am living for them, not for me. She squeezed his fingers, a new strength flowing through her. What if we went to Montana together? We could start over where nobody knows our story, where they cannot judge us. You know that work, Jonah, and you are good at it. And me? I can cook and clean and keep the books for the ranch. We could build something just for us. You would leave your family for that? He asked, his eyes searching hers. I would visit. I would write, she said, her voice steady. But yes, I would leave for the chance to be my own person, to find out who I am when I am not living under the weight of other people's opinions. Jonah looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. You are serious. I am scared to death, she admitted. But yes, I am serious. Your parents would never allow it, the two of us, traveling alone. Then we will get married, Clara declared, the idea taking root and blooming in an instant. Before we go, we will tell them we are starting our life together, and we will just go. The silence in the room was huge. Jonah stared, looking for any hint that she was not sure. She met his gaze, her heart pounding with a fierce, wild hope. You would marry me? He finally whispered. Knowing what folks will say? I would marry you for what I would be gaining, she said, cupping his face in her hands. A partner. A real life. A chance to be brave. That is worth more than any reputation. He kissed her then, a deep, desperate kiss that felt like a promise. When he pulled away, his eyes were shining. I will write them back, he said. I will ask about a job for you, too. But Clara, if they say no, we will find something else. Together. That evening, Clara told her parents. With Jonah standing right behind her, his hand resting on her shoulder, she took a deep breath. We have something to tell you, she began. Her father put down his pipe. Her mother stopped her sewing. Jonah has been offered a good job on a ranch in Montana, Clara said, her voice clear and strong. And we have decided to take it. Together. Together? Her mother whispered. We want to get married first, Clara went on. Just a small ceremony here. Then we will leave for Montana to start our new life. Her father was quiet for what felt like an eternity. Then he stood up, walked over to Jonah, and held out his hand. You will take care of my daughter. It was not a question, it was a command. Jonah shook his hand firmly. With my life, sir. And you will write, her father added, looking at them both. Every week, Clara promised, hugging him tightly. But her mother had not moved, her face pale. Clara knelt by her chair. Mama, please say something. You are leaving me, her mother said, her voice cracking. You are choosing him. I am not choosing him over you, Clara said gently, taking her mother's hands. I am choosing a life for myself. You always wished for something more for this inn, for us. Well, this is my chance for something more. I want to see who I am when I am not afraid to live. Her mother's face crumpled and she pulled Clara into a fierce hug. I am so scared for you, she sobbed. But I understand. You are braver than I ever was. She pulled back and looked past Clara, locking eyes with Jonah. You listen to me. If you ever hurt her, there is not a place in this world you can hide. Are we clear? Crystal clear, ma'am, Jonah said. Good, her mother sniffed, wiping her eyes. Then I suppose we have a wedding to plan. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind. Her mother threw herself into the plans, sewing a beautiful dress and baking enough food to feed the entire town. Her father handled the letters to the ranch, securing positions for both of them. The town buzzed with gossip, some calling it romantic, others a scandal. Clara learned to ignore it all. On her wedding day, she looked in the mirror and saw someone new. Not prettier, just more solid, more real. She had finally grown into her own skin. Her mother came into the room, her eyes misty. "You look beautiful, Clara." "I look like myself," Clara replied. "And that is what makes you beautiful," her mother said, her voice thick with emotion. "When you were born," her mother began, her voice trembling, "I was so scared. I just wanted to keep you safe, but being safe made you build walls around your heart. It made you quiet and small. I did not know how to help you." She took a shaky breath. "Until Jonah came. He did not try to fix you. He just gave you a reason to be brave again." "I love you, Mama," Clara whispered. "I love you too, sweet girl." Her mother kissed her forehead. "Now go on. Your husband is waiting." The ceremony was simple, held right there in the parlor. The sun streamed through the windows, lighting up the wildflowers Mary had picked for them. But Clara only had eyes for Jonah. As she walked toward him, she looked into those storm-gray eyes that had seen her, truly seen her, from the very beginning. As the minister spoke of love and new beginnings, she knew she had made the right choice. She was not just gaining a husband, she was gaining a life, on the sacred bond of marriage. Clara barely heard the words. She was looking at Jonah's hands holding hers, listening to his voice shake as he said his vows. Then he slipped a simple gold ring on her finger and promised, "I will see you always, no matter what." "I promise to see you too," Clara whispered back. "Every single day." When the preacher said they were married, Jonah kissed her so tenderly it made her heart ache. This was real. This was their beginning. They had a small celebration with just cake, coffee, and her parents. Mary gave Clara a big hug and made her promise to write. Her father shook Jonah's hand for a long time and whispered something that made Jonah nod his head seriously. Her mother cried the whole time, but she was smiling too. They would leave for Montana at first light. Jonah had the wagon packed and ready. 3 days to a new life. That night, Clara lay in their marriage bed next to Jonah. The lamp was out, but moonlight spilled across the quilt. "Are you scared?" Jonah asked in the dark. "Terrified," Clara admitted. "How about you?" Beyond words, they turned toward each other in the moonlight. In the low light, Jonah's face was a map of shadows, but Clara knew every line. She ran a finger along the scar on his cheek. "We could still back out," he whispered. "I could get a job here." Clara silenced him with a kiss. "No," she breathed against his lips. "We chose this. We chose us." He held her tight, his heartbeat steady and strong against hers. For the first time in forever, wrapped in his arms, Clara felt like she was truly home. The next morning came fast. Jonah was already up, staring out at the mountains. "Getting cold feet?" she asked softly. "About 100 of them," he said, his eyes serious. "But not about you. Never about you." They put on their sturdy traveling clothes. Clara took a final look at the room she'd known her whole life. The same room she had slept in for 26 years. It was safe, familiar, and felt like a cage. "Ready?" Jonah's voice came from the door. Clara grabbed her satchel. "Ready." Downstairs, her parents stood beside an untouched breakfast. Her mother, trying so hard to be strong, pushed a bundle into Clara's arms. "Food," she said, her voice thick. "And your grandma's Bible. Remember the brave women you come from." Clara hugged the gift, her throat too tight for words. Her father gruffly gave Jonah a small pouch of money and a folded letter. "For the ranch owner," he explained. "He's a good man. He'll do right by you." Jonah nodded his thanks. "Taking care of your daughter is all the thanks I need, sir." The goodbyes were rushed. Anything more would have shattered them all. Clara breathed in her mother's familiar scent one last time. She hugged her father, a quick, hard squeeze, then climbed onto the wagon. As they pulled away, she saw her parents in the doorway, a final wave before the road turned. After a long silence, Jonah asked, "You all right?" Clara dried her cheeks. "Ask me that when we get to Montana." The trip was supposed to take 3 days, but spring rains turned it into 4. The roads were a mess. Their first night, huddled together under a blanket, the cold ground could not touch the warmth between them. "No regrets?" he asked into the dark. "Not a single one," she whispered back. For the first time, she told him everything about her lonely childhood. And Jonah, he told her his story too. He spoke of a cruel father who called him stupid and worthless. He ran away at 14 and wandered for years, never letting anyone get close. "Why?" Clara asked. "I was ashamed," he admitted. "My father said I was too dumb to learn. And I believed him." "You are none of those things," she said fiercely. "You just needed someone to believe in you." The next day, they traveled through wide-open country. Clara soaked in the sight of her new world. That evening, they treated themselves to a warm meal at a roadhouse. She fell asleep listening to Jonah practice reading from her grandmother's Bible. But the third day was a trial, with rain turning the road into a river of mud. They were soaked, shivering, and exhausted. They could not even get a fire started. "I'm sorry," Jonah chattered. "I should have—" Clara cut him off, pulling him into a hug. "Stop that. This is just life, Jonah. It is hard, but we are in it together." Huddled against the cold, Clara realized this was more real than any comfort she had ever known. By the afternoon of the 4th day, the sun was shining when Jonah pointed ahead. "There it is," he said, "the Clark Ranch." It was a huge, bustling place with a big house, barns, and men working everywhere. Clara's heart pounded in her chest. A tall, weathered man came out to meet them. "Mr. Clark," Jonah said. "I am Jonah Reed, and this is my wife, Clara." The word wife still made her feel a spark of joy. Clark's sharp eyes softened into a smile. "Reed, I got the letter from your father-in-law. We served together back in '63. Welcome." He shook their hands warmly. A kind cook named Margaret showed them to a small, clean cabin just for them. "It is for the married folks," she said. "Jonah, you will be with the horses. And Clara, I could sure use another hand in the kitchen, feeding 40 hungry men." Relief washed over Clara. "I would be glad to help. Some folks are just born into judgment, treated like they are less than, and never given a fair shake." That was the story for Clara and Jonah, until they landed on a ranch that offered them a new beginning. This story is about how hard, honest work can build a life worth living, and it is a reminder to never give up on yourself. That first night, the dining hall was a whirlwind of noise and strange faces. All the ranch hands were friendly, but Clara felt like a fish out of water. Jonah knew it, and he found her hand under the table, a silent promise that they were in this together. Later, in their own little cabin, they fell onto a real bed with clean sheets. It felt like heaven. Clara whispered into the dark, "We made it, Jonah. We're really here." His voice was full of wonder when he asked, "Are you happy, Clara?" She thought about it. She was bone-tired and scared, but underneath it all, a small, tough seed of happiness was there. "I am," she said. "Are you?" Jonah just pulled her closer. "Ask me again in a month, darling." That next month was the toughest and best of Clara's life. She was up before the chickens, helping Margaret make breakfast for the crew. Then her whole day was spent cooking, cleaning, and learning the rhythms of the ranch. Her once soft hands started to get calloused and tough. Her back hurt from wrestling with heavy cast-iron pots. But Margaret praised her for being a quick study. From the kitchen window, Clara would watch Jonah with the horses. He had a natural gift, a way of being firm but gentle that the animals understood. The other hands saw it too, and you could tell they respected him for it. Slowly, she saw the worry leave his face, replaced by a real smile. But the other ranch wives kept their distance. Clara knew why. She and Jonah were outsiders. They had to earn their place. Some nights she was so tired she would fall into bed with her work clothes still on. One evening, about 6 weeks in, Clara sat on the steps of their cabin, just watching the sunset bleed all over the sky. Jonah came and sat beside her, still covered in the day's dust. "You're crying," he said, his voice soft. Clara touched her face, surprised to feel the tears. "I guess I am." "What is wrong?" "Nothing. And everything," she said with a shaky laugh. "I just miss what was familiar. I miss knowing my place without having to ask." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I know that sounds ungrateful. We have good work, a roof over our heads. But it does not feel like home yet," Jonah finished for her. "I know. I feel it too." They sat there for a bit, watching the last of the light fade away. Then Jonah spoke. "You remember what you told me back in that barn, when I was ready to run off to protect you?" "I remember," she whispered. "You said you wanted something real. You wanted me." He took her hand in his. "This is it, Clara. This is the real part. The hard, honest work of building a life. And it is hard because it means something. We are not hiding anymore. We are living." She turned to look at him, a small smile on her face. "When did you get so smart?" "I had a good teacher," he said, kissing her forehead. "Just give it time. Rome was not built in a day, you know. Did you read that in a book?" "Margaret told me," he chuckled. "She is full of old sayings. Now come on inside, I have something for you." Inside, Jonah carefully took a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "I wrote this," he said, his voice a little shaky. "Took me 3 hours. I'm still not sure about the spelling." Clara's hands trembled as she unfolded it. The writing was still clumsy, but it was so much clearer than when he first started. "Dear Clara," it began, "you left everything behind to come here with me. Your home, your family. The life you knew. Some days I see you looking tired and I worry I asked too much of you. But then I remember you telling me that just being safe is not really living. You said you wanted to be brave. I am writing this to remind you, on the hard days, that you are. You are strong, and you are building something new. I am so proud to be your husband and build this life with you. Thank you for choosing me. Love, Jonah." Clara's tears blurred the words. She hugged him tight. "This is the most perfect thing anyone has ever given me," she whispered. "It is just words on paper." She pulled back, holding his face in her hands. "It is you trying. Caring enough to tell me I am brave when I feel like anything but. This is everything." Later that night, as she lay in his arms, a feeling finally settled deep in her chest. Home. It was not a place. It was this right here. The choice to stay and keep on choosing each other, day after difficult day. 2 months later, a young ranch hand named Peter found Clara in the kitchen, twisting his hat in his hands. "Ma'am, Mrs. Reed," he stammered, "I heard you taught Jonah to read. I was wondering, could you teach me too? I am tired of not knowing what I am signing my name to." Clara's heart warmed. "I would be happy to teach you, Peter. There is no need for pay. Just show up, ready to learn." Word got around. Soon, Clara was teaching 5 ranch hands in the evenings. They gathered around the big kitchen table with primers and slates, hungry for knowledge they had been denied their whole lives. Jonah often sat in, patiently helping the newer students. He remembered the sting of not knowing, and he used that memory to be gentle and kind. After a while, the other ranch wives started to soften toward Clara. Sarah, whose husband was one of Clara's students, invited her over for coffee. "You have surely made a splash," Sarah said, linking her arm through Clara's after church. "Teaching these men to read is giving them a real chance at a better life." "I'm just doing what someone once did for Jonah." "It is more than that," Sarah said, lowering her voice. "We all heard the gossip when you first arrived, about how fast you two married, about Jonah being an uneducated mountain man. Folks assumed the worst. Clara knew they had. But watching you two, Sarah went on, seeing how he looks at you, well, it is plain to see this is the real thing, and that is rare enough to make people see past ugly rumors. Thank you for showing us what brave looks like. That evening, Clara told Jonah what Sarah had said. They were sitting on their cabin steps watching the stars appear. "We are going to make it here," she said, leaning against him. "Did you ever doubt it?" he asked. "Every single day," she admitted. "But I kept choosing it anyway. I kept believing that the hard parts would get easier and the good parts would grow. And they have." Jonah kissed her, slow and deep. "I love you," he said. "I do not think I have said it plain like that yet, but I do. More than I thought I could love anything." "I love you too," she said, the words feeling true and solid. "I chose you then, and I choose you now, every day." "That is a long time," he smiled. "Good," she said, resting her head on his shoulder. "I'm counting on it." By the time autumn painted the fields gold, their little cabin felt like a real home. Jonah had been made head horse trainer, and they had saved enough for a proper table and chairs. Jonah even built a bookshelf himself. One night he set down the book he was reading aloud. "Clara," he said, "I want to write to your parents. I want to tell them we are happy, and I want to do it myself." Clara's eyes lit up. "That is a wonderful idea. I will help you with the spelling." They wrote the letter together. Jonah wrote about his work, the community, and his promise to always take care of her. He wanted to honor the trust her family had placed in him. Clara added her own note, telling them about her teaching and the friends she had made. She told them that Montana was home now, and that she and Jonah were building something true, something worth all the fear it took to get there. The next afternoon, Clara taught her biggest class yet, with 8 grown men bent over their slates. She thought back to that first lesson with Jonah, how she had feared she was not enough. She had been so wrong. Teaching him had not just given him words, it had given him dignity and hope. And in teaching him, Clara had learned the very same lesson for herself. She was not defined by what others thought she should be. She could choose brave over safe, and build a real life over an easy one. Peter looked up from his slate. "How do you spell future?" he asked. Clara smiled and spelled it out for him. The word hung in the air, feeling just right. That was exactly what they were all doing out here in the wilds of Montana. They were building futures, not just for the ranch hands learning their letters, but for Jonah, who was proving a man could change his whole life. And for Clara herself, who was finally writing her own story instead of living out one her parents had planned. The proof of that showed up with the first big snow in November. It was a letter from her folks. Clara's hands shook a little as she saw her mother's familiar handwriting. Jonah stood right behind her, his arm around her waist, reading along. The letter was full of town gossip and news from the inn, but underneath it all, Clara could feel something new: acceptance, pride. Her mother wrote, "We miss you something terrible, but from Jonah's letters, we can see you're building a good life out there." She continued, "You've given that husband of yours more than just his letters. You gave him a real sense of himself. We're so proud of you, Clara, for the strong woman you've become." Clara had to read that line 3 times. "She's proud of me," she whispered. Jonah hugged her tight. "Of course she is. Look at what we've done." Right then, Clara knew what they had to do. "We should visit them. In the spring, when the snow clears." She turned to face him. "I want them to meet the Jonah I know." "You think they'd want that?" he asked, a hint of doubt in his voice. "I know they would," Clara said. "My father asked you to take care of me. I think he'd like to see you helped me learn to take care of myself." But first, they had to make it through that Montana winter, and it was a mean one. The snow piled high, and the cold was so bitter it froze the ink in their pens if you weren't right by the fire. That hardship, though, had a way of bringing folks together. They shared what they had and looked out for one another. When a bad sickness swept through the ranch, Clara nursed 3 of the hands back to health. One of them was Peter, her very first student. For 3 days, he was lost in a fever. Clara stayed by his side the whole time, reading to him from the simple book he'd learned from. When his fever finally broke, he looked at her, his eyes clear for the first time in days. "You stayed," he whispered, confused. "Of course I did, Peter. But why? I ain't nobody." Clara took his hand. "Don't you ever say that. You're a man who had the courage to ask for help to learn. In my book, that makes you somebody special." After that, Peter told everyone how Mrs. Reed had sat with him, making him feel like he was worth saving. And the story spread, making Clara feel like she truly belonged. That long, dark winter tested Clara and Jonah, too. Being cooped up all the time led to short tempers and silly arguments about things that didn't matter one bit. One night, after a fight, Clara stepped outside into the freezing air, just needing to get away. Jonah followed her out, wrapping a warm blanket around her shoulders. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I am too," she cried. "I don't know how to do this, Jonah. This being married through hard times." "Me neither," he admitted, pulling her close. "But maybe we just have to figure it out as we go along. We already did the hardest part. We chose each other when everyone else said we shouldn't." His voice was steady and sure. "If we can do that, we can survive a fight about lamp oil." She had to laugh through her tears. "It was a stupid fight, wasn't it?" "The stupidest," he agreed, kissing her forehead. "The real question is, do you still choose me, even when I'm stubborn and wrong?" "Yes," she said without a second thought. "Every single day." That night, they made a promise. To remember that choosing each other wasn't a one-time thing. It was a choice you had to make every day, good or bad. When spring finally came, it felt like the whole world was coming back to life. In early May, they packed the wagon and made the 5-day journey back to Colorado. Seeing the familiar mountains of her home made Clara's heart beat a little faster. Her parents were waiting on the porch of the inn. Her mother ran down and pulled Clara into a hug so tight it nearly knocked her over. "Let me look at you," she said, her eyes welling up. "You seem more yourself." "I am," Clara said, smiling. Her father shook Jonah's hand, then surprised them both by pulling him into a rough hug. "You kept your promise," was all he said, his voice thick with emotion. They spent 3 wonderful days there. Clara read her parents the letters Jonah had written her, his simple words painting a clear picture of their life and his love for her. Her mother wept as she listened. Jonah showed her father the journal he kept, filled with his own observations about the ranch. The writing was still a little rough, but it was his. "I can write my own name now," Jonah said with pride. "I can write 'I love you' without having to ask how to spell it." Her father nodded slowly. "That's more than letters, son. That's dignity." "Clara gave me that," Jonah said. "She gave me back something I didn't even know I was missing." On their last night, Clara's mother took her aside in the kitchen. "I was wrong," she said, plain and simple. "About Jonah, about what you were doing. I thought you were giving up your whole life." "You weren't entirely wrong," Clara admitted. "It did cost me things. Comfort, safety, knowing what each day would bring." "But what did you gain?" her mother asked. Clara thought for a moment. "I gained myself," she said, her voice filled with a quiet strength. "I gained a partner who truly sees me, and I learned I'm brave enough to build my own life, even when it's scary." Her mother pulled her in for another hug. "Darling, that's worth everything." The journey back to Montana felt different. This time, Clara wasn't leaving home, she was going to it. Even stronger. When they returned to the ranch, they found the folks they taught had kept the lessons going all on their own. Peter was showing 2 new fellas their letters, and Sarah had even borrowed Clara's books to teach her own kids. The little community they had started was putting down deep roots. That summer was the best of Clara's life. Her reading classes got so big they spilled out from her cabin into the main hall and under the shade of a big old cottonwood tree. Jonah kept on with the horses, but he also started helping Clara with her schooling materials. He knew what it felt like to be on the other side of learning, and he used that to make the lessons kinder and clearer. One day in August, Mr. Clark came to them with an idea. He said the county was fixing to build a real school, and he couldn't think of anyone better to run it than Clara. Her heart just about jumped out of her chest. A real school. Mr. Clark said she would need to get certified. But with all the good she had already done, he reckoned the board would overlook most of the rules. The pay was a whole lot better than cooking, and the ranch would even give the land for the building. He looked from Clara to Jonah and asked what they thought. Clara glanced at Jonah and saw the pride shining in his eyes. She smiled and said, "I think yes, absolutely yes." They built the school that fall. It was a simple wood building with real desks and a big chalkboard. Clara officially became the teacher in October, standing before her first class of 20 students, a mix of children and grown-ups. On that first day, Jonah sat in the back row, a slate on his desk, his eyes fixed on Clara. After class, she asked him why he was there, seeing as he could already read just fine. He stood up and took a piece of chalk. He wrote on the board, "Will you teach our child to read?" Clara just stared at the words, her breath caught in her throat. She looked from the board to Jonah. His hand gently touched her belly. He told her he had been paying attention. He noticed she was tired and that the smell of coffee had bothered her 3 days running. He wanted to start a family, and he wanted their child to grow up knowing how to read, never feeling the shame he once did. Tears welled up in Clara's eyes. Saying it out loud made it real. "We're having a baby," she said. Jonah pulled her in close, promising to be the kind of father who reads to his child and helps with their lessons. "That sounds perfect," Clara whispered. Their daughter, Ruth, was born in April. When Jonah held that tiny girl for the first time, his big, scarred hands so gentle Clara saw him cry. "Hello, little one," he whispered to his daughter. "I'm your father, and I have so much to teach you." "We both do," Clara said, her heart full. In the months after, Clara learned that building a life was daily work. It was Jonah getting up with a crying baby so she could sleep. It was Clara teaching her class while nursing Ruth in the back of the room. It was both of them, worn out and stretched thin, but always choosing each other. When Ruth was about 6 months old, a letter came from Clara's mother. Inside was a news clipping that said David Mitchell's wife had packed up and left him, taking their 2 children with her. Her mother's note just said, "You chose right, darling." Clara folded the paper up. David Mitchell felt like a person from another lifetime. She wasn't that girl anymore, the one who felt small and unworthy. She was Clara Reed, a teacher, a wife, and a mother. She was a woman who had taught a mountain man to read, and in doing so, had finally learned to see herself. That evening she found Jonah on the porch of their cabin. He had expanded it, adding a real bedroom for Ruth and a little study for his own books. He was on the porch, reading to little Ruth from a simple book, making funny voices for the animals. "The cat sat on the mat," he read, bouncing the baby on his knee. Ruth just gurgled and reached for the book, happy as could be. Clara sat down and rested her head on his shoulder. "I got a letter from my mother," she said. "Just some news that closed an old door." She watched her daughter's face, so serious as she looked at the pictures in the book. "Jonah," she started, "do you remember that first night you came stumbling through our door?" He kissed the top of Ruth's head. "I remember thinking I was done for, that I had finally pushed my luck too far." "But you weren't," Clara said. "No," Jonah replied. "I found something worth living for instead." He smiled at her. "It started with you holding my hand, with you offering to teach me, and with you seeing the real me and not turning away." "I see you now," Clara said softly. "I see a good man who reads to his daughter." I see the man who helps his wife with her lesson plans and writes to the in-laws about his baby girl's first laugh. I see a man with enough grit to keep learning and to always choose love. And Jonah would look right back at her and say, I see you too. I see the woman who's teaching half this county how to read, giving folks the same hope she gave me. A woman brave enough to build her own life, even if it meant leaving everything behind. They sat together as the sun went down, with little Ruth sleeping between them. Inside their cabin was the bookshelf Jonah built, filled with the books they had found together. On her desk was a letter to her parents, telling them all about the life they were making. Read me something, Clara said softly. Jonah picked up a small book. The man walked through the woods, he read, his voice strong and clear. He was looking for something he had lost a long, long time ago. And finally, after so much searching, he found it. Not back where he lost it, but somewhere new. A place that felt just like home. That's beautiful, Clara whispered. What is that from? Jonah just smiled and showed her the cover. It was the same simple children's book they used for his very first lessons. But hearing him read it, those simple words felt like the most important story in the world. Home, Clara repeated. That is what we found, is not it? We found each other, and we found ourselves, Jonah agreed. I found the man I could be because you believed in me, and you found the woman you truly were. Ruth moved in her sleep, her tiny hand reaching up to touch the long scar on Jonah's face. He gently kissed her little palm, and Clara's heart felt like it would burst. This was their life. It was not perfect, but it was real, built on the kind of love that gets stronger when it is tested. When Ruth was old enough to understand, Clara would tell her the story. About a terrible winter storm, a desperate man, and a woman who offered him letters on a page. She would tell her that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is ask for a little help, and other times the bravest thing is to offer it. Teaching someone to read is not just about words. It is about giving them back their pride and their hope. And Ruth, sitting at the same desk where her father learned his letters, would practice her own. She would write, "My mother teaches people to read. My father learned from her. They chose to be brave. They chose each other. Then they chose me." Clara would read those simple words and remember that night long ago when she asked Jonah what he wanted. "You," he had said, "I want you." And she got him. This man, this life, this surprising joy they built together one day at a time. It was not a fairy tale ending, but something much better. It was an ending they had earned. They knew that love alone is not always enough. You need respect, and you need the strength to keep choosing each other, especially when it gets hard. Outside, the sun set over the mountains. Inside the cabin, three people sat in the warm lamplight, building a life not on what they were told they should have, but on what they had the courage to make for themselves. And in the morning, they would wake up and choose it all again. The hard work and the beautiful ordinary moments that make up a life. They would keep writing their own story, one word at a time, until the last page was full. And it would be a good story, not because it was perfect, but because every single word of it was true. That was the lesson. That was the life they built. And it was more than enough. It was everything. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.